Today on episode 243 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. Today we speak to a real leader, someone in the trenches, someone on the front lines, someone who's doing the job just like you. That's right, folks. Today we're speaking not to a coach, not to an author, but rather one of your colleagues. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, welcome all, and thank you for tuning in to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. So great to have you here. And first and foremost, thank you for all you who checked in with me recently. Yes, unfortunately, I got off track with my recording schedule. As you know, if this is not your first time listening, this is my side hustle, and sometimes, you know what, real life gets in the way, and as leaders, we need to learn and need to know how to prioritize. And unfortunately, podcast episodes had to take a back seat for a little bit. But that's all right, because I'm here. And thank you for those who reached out to me, said, hey, hope all is well. Just check it in and see where the next episode is. Well, it's here, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we got something different. And you, the listeners, have reached out to me and said, hey, Scott, these authors are great. These experts are great, but they're not us. They're not us who are doing the job day in, day out. And yes, we can take the lessons that they talk about, of course, and apply them and great results and stuff like this. But we can't relate to them all the time because they're not us. They're not leaders in the trenches. They're not in there day in, day out. They are authors. They are coaches. They're out spreading the word of the concepts that they have. And as great as they are, sometimes, it's just not necessarily the most relatable thing. So, this episode is all about that, getting someone who's relatable for you to listen and talk about, the successes, the struggles, and the way forward, And that today is my guest, John Audet. And I've known John for quite some time, so it was great to actually get to interview a buddy of yours, someone you've known. It's quite different. So anyway, today, John and we talk a lot about, different things. Obviously, it's about him, of course, his background, what drove him to become a leader in the military. You see, John still serves in the Canadian Armed Forces, but rather not full-time, but part-time. He had a lengthy career as a full-time member, since transitioned from full-time to part-time, and now as well works for the Canadian government, but in the Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard. So he's a leader over there as well. So that's what we talk about. We talk about what works in motivating others and achieving the organization's aim. We talk about how he coaches others, right? And how he leverages that to, basically lift the team up. We've also talked a bit about failures and the lessons he learned and how he's applying his military experience for you old military listeners out there to his civilian life, and the interesting thing, the biggest leadership challenge he's currently facing. So that's today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. You wanted someone real? Well, you got someone real. And that person is John Audet. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with John Audet, all about leading from the trenches. John, my man, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Scott.
So, brought you on the show because what I'm hearing from the audience is, having all these authors, quote unquote, experts, speakers coming on the show all the time is great, but every now and then people want to hear about it from a real person from the trenches, per
Real
se.
person from the trenches. Okay.
Hence why I got you here. So
Okay, that
before we,
explains it. Makes sense.
yeah, yeah, and there was obviously a hint in there, folks. The real person from the trenches. So, John, before we dive into the show, let's just give a quick background on yourself, so they know who you are, the background you got going on, and the perspective you come from. Let's start off with that, and then we'll dive deeper.
Yeah, I'll try to. I'll keep it as short as I can. So, uh, retired Reg Force Army guy. So retired as major in the Artillery Corps. Transferred over into the reserves as a deputy commander of a reserve infantry unit, and about a month, not even a month ago, just took over the reserve artillery unit in the Montreal region on the Second Field Artillery Regiment. That's my part-time job. That's the stuff I do for fun. I guess, like we were joking around earlier, it's my hobby. Is now the army has become my hobby. My full-time job is actually I'm a operational planner for the Canadian Coast Guard Central Region, which covers Ontario, Quebec, and we run operations in the Arctic during the Arctic season, icebreaking season. And I do anything usually that's within the current fiscal year. If it hasn't been planned or it's an additional add-on, I'm the guy that looks at all that. So, from a military perspective, we call it the J35, so the 3-5 planner. So that's the quick version.
That's the very quick version. Actually, the funny story is actually our actual history of when we first met.
Yeah. Yep,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. John was actually a squadron commander at the Royal Military College when I was a student.
I believe you were in your when I showed
Fourth
up. You were in
year.
your last year. Yeah, your
Yeah,
fourth year when I showed up.
Yeah, I was in my fourth year, so we go
Yeah,
way back.
yeah.
It's funny how we like
2000, 2005.
2005
is
is
when we
correct.
met. Yeah,
Yeah. So there we go.
just a
Now
few
let's
years.
keep just a couple years. But let's keep the show about you. I'm interested. What got you to become an officer, therefore a leader in the Canadian Armed Forces? What was the driver behind you there?
I was all of 18, so I'm not sure what the actual, at the time, what the answer was. I know when I first joined, actually, I initially joined in the reserves back in 98. And the quickest way in the door, not knowing what was going on, was actually to become enlisted in the air defense artillery. And after about 6 months, I was like, yeah, this enlisted stuff is not for me. I like doing the hands work, but I like being involved in planning. I like decision making. I like that higher level stuff to then get to the execution. So then I quickly I applied and transferred to the officer corps within the same branch. I stayed within the artillery, specializing in air defense. And then after I finished my university degree, I just transferred over, did what they call a component transfer into the Reg Force, and that was 17 years of my life. But when I first did it, I don't think there was anything other than, oh, officer and CO, what's the difference? Oh, my dad was an officer, let's go officer. That honestly, that at 18 years old, that probably was what made sense to me at the time. Now I would say it's just the challenge. There's so much challenge and the human challenge, the everything that comes with it. Challenging the organization, challenging the individuals, myself, and everything. Just that whole construct is just sometimes you just don't know where to go, and it's that's what makes it interesting, is having to find that answer. There's nothing that's cookie cutter to any of this. There's the techniques, the theories, the this, the that, they're all great, but they're all designed and developed in back rooms or something, or whatever. And then you get into the leading soldiers, leading people, like obviously now I do it outside, and dealing with non-military personnel, and it's just a different challenge. So every day is a different challenge. You come and try to figure out how to make people go in the direction you need them to go for the organization. I would say sometimes it's easier in the military because, well, they're uniformed and they respond a little bit differently. But the bigger challenge has been outside of the military, trying to get people that don't have that kind of background, that aren't always there because the institution has called them there. They're there because it's a job. And I think that's the more interesting challenge of getting people to move in the direction you need them to move.
It's interesting. You talked about the theories and stuff like this, and I often talk about overlays, and like you got to overlay it to your current situation, see what fits, see what doesn't fit, right? And I think that's a bit of the problem in today's age is that people want the out of the box per se solution that fits everything. One size fits all. I'm like, doesn't exist in leadership. Sorry, it's just not there. But at the end there, you talked about the challenge of motivating people outside of military. I'm interested in your take here of like, how do we go about doing that from your perspective? What has worked for you in motivating people to achieve the aim?
Uh, I would say it hasn't been easy simply because when I moved over from being military or full time military into a different organization, they kind of, I'm the outsider. I come in at 40 something years old. Most of these people have been with the same department for quite a while. So a different culture, and I show up as an outsider. Some people know me, some people don't know me. And what I've found is trying to lead by example. So if I'm saying I'm going to do it some way, or I'm always passing the same message. So the example I give for the Coast Guard, when I talk to anyone that works for me, or when I have a team, or when I deal with others, I always say, well, what's the Coast Guard's mandate? Where are we going? What does the Coast Guard need to achieve in order to make sure it has success? And that's how I make decisions. And that's when I make decisions and I pass on decisions to people, that I explained it to them that way. And I try to say as consistent as possible so that they understand that I'm not going to flip flop around my decisions because of, oh, this or that, or I try to maintain. So like stay the course, maintain. The Coast Guard needs to achieve a certain thing. Well, my decisions will all be made, be it good or bad decisions. They'll all be made with that in mind and trying to get to that end state. In our case, I'll give the example with the Coast Guard is keep the ship sailing. They have to sail. So every decision is made. A budget decision is made with preference of keeping the ship sailing, fixing the ships on time, making sure we have the right crew at the right time. That's how I do all my decisions, and I coach the people that way too. I say, like, if you're looking at something, keep that in mind. If you're going to make a decision, you might have two options. Which is the option that is the best suited to achieve the end state that we're looking for? If one of them clearly doesn't help it, then it's a no-brainer. Then if both are there, you try to work with which one is the best at that time, and then therefore you can't really go wrong. And I also try to make them. I found there's a bit of people are afraid to make mistakes, whereas I think how we grew up in the military, like, it's somewhat encouraged. You have to try, and if you're going to try, you're going to make a mistake. Well, that's the mentality I use. Is I bring to the department where I'm at now is try it. If you're going to make a mistake, I'd rather you make a mistake trying, and then we can all learn from it and all get better from it, rather than not try at all and just let something fester and then we have to fix it, rather than just kind of correct the course.
No, so what I heard from you was, you look at the organization's mission and you run with that as a guiding principle, pretty much, yeah. Right?
Pretty much.
Which is funny because we were talking about that earlier this evening, were we not?
Yeah, we were.
We were talking about that during our leader growth mastermind call. For the listener out there, John's a active member of the group, so yeah. We're actually talking about mission and vision and values and all those good things, and just lined up perfectly, actually. But now back on line with the interview, though, you said something interesting there, and you said how I coach. This is how I coach. So I want to go down that route because, a leader's role, definitely there's coaching aspects of it. So outside of that, how do you coach? What's your process? Do you have a process or some principles? How does John go about coaching people, whether those are subordinates or maybe just other people?
You know what? I'm not 100% sure. I don't. I definitely don't have a pattern on this one. It's more of if I sit in a situation and I see a person's, be it a peer, even a little anecdote I can say after. So even a peer, a superior, or some subordinate, another worker, if they're trying to deal with the situation, oftentimes, even if I think I know what the answer is, I won't give it to them. I will try to have a discussion and work it through and try to get them to get to a solution. Maybe it's not the one I have in my head, but then it's not necessarily the one I have in my head. It's not necessarily the right one either. Come on, I'm an army guy. I know nothing about boats. I know they float on water. I know they have to do stuff. So I'm not the right guy for boat type answers, but the process to get to an answer, I've done it for years. I mean, we're trained. We've applied that thought process, the so what, the what if, you know, and that's the example. Like I'll try to help them work through it, or they'll go through a situation and you can tell they're not very comfortable with what happened and say, okay, well, let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's walk through it. What do you think you did right? What do you think you did wrong? What could you have done better? Were you missing information? And I'll just get people to think. That's the only way I can think about coaching, or try to give them different tools or different ways to look at the same situation. We had one come up a while back where one of the captains decided to say they needed, let's say, a medevac. Well, for you and me, Scott, medevac means something very, very specific. For some reason, there it didn't. And even I was confused watching the situation go, and I let it go because I was trying to understand what was going on. And they were coming to me for help and asking me questions because of my military background. They were asking me stuff about airplanes, stuff about this and that, because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But the whole time I was trying to dig and go, is this really a medical evacuation? And then at one point I asked him, I said, okay, if this is this critical, are you willing to cancel something, to redirect an asset, to move this, to do that, to go and save that person's life? And they said, well, his life's not in danger. I said, well, then why are we treating this as a medevac? If it's just he's hurt, he can stay on the ship and the ship's going to hit dock in 48 hours. Why are we rushing to get him off this ship? And they're like, but we're not. Like, then why are we acting like it? And it just kept going. And then after a while, they started realizing, they're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe it wasn't as urgent, but they got so wrapped up in the situation that they couldn't pull themselves away to actually realize that because one person used a word that made it sound critical, it actually wasn't critical. So yeah, I used it as a coaching opportunity because I said, when I realized it, that's what I did. I was like, okay, let's use this learning, and I brought it up several times for days after with different people within the watch floor in that organization that were periphery to the incident or that were involved with it, just to get them to think and say, okay, you was this the right action? So that's sort of kind of that's the way I would say I do it. I just see an opportunity and try to use it. And if it can benefit me, if it can benefit the people around me in the organization to better them, that's what it's all about, right? I would say, like, when you're saying like leaders, leaders, part of it is training other people, but at some point, in my view, a good leader won't be afraid of a subordinate that they can train to be a better leader and potentially better than them, right? Because that's how you make an organization better. But then again, I don't, like, the organization is, I'm just one member of that organization, and I'm just trying to make it better wherever I can.
No, absolutely. Um, it's all about. I always look at it as I got to train my guys to replace me one day. And I definitely want them to be better than what I am. So, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to drop the ego per se, and it takes a lot of work. But I like what you talked about though. Is like those ad hoc, but yet in the moment opportunities, and I think there's a lot of value in there, and a lot of people don't place a lot of value on that. They think mentoring and coaching has to be this big formal program, blah 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 blah. But no, it has. It's better in the moment. And what I heard from you, what went right, what went wrong, what could we do better, blah blah blah. AAR process, right? How many times have I talked about that on the
Yeah.
podcast? It's the good old Army AAR, but why? Because it works. It
Yeah.
just works. right? It
You
is
know what?
just take it and run
I
with it.
still hate the AR process. I hate the formal AR process just because you got to sit down and write the darn thing. But doing it live and seeing someone do something, or within a couple of minutes, and helping them look and analyze that, it's like saying the ad hoc, just at the moment, seeing it and being able to correct someone. Not correct, help them improve. And because I always try to find every learning opportunity I can. Like, so we have, like, where I am now with the Coast Guard, there's a watch floor. So I like going in there and taking my years of experience of doing operations, and walking in there and seeing how they do it, and then trying to help them improve, and bring more of a, because we're still building that organization for the Coast Guard. Um, so it's very, very young people with not a lot of background in the operations being asked to be senior duty officers, and not necessarily having all that baggage that we do when we put people in those positions. Because I mean, usually the junior guy in one of ours is the comms guy who's just learned how to talk on a radio, but everyone else has 5-6 years, so many courses before they sit in there, and they're that representative of that branch, right? So
So yeah, getting involved, right, and helping develop others. Taking your skill sets that might not be even directly related to your current position, but taking your skill sets and helping others, grow. I like to change gears a little bit. You obviously got a lot of experience. You're a senior officer in Canadian forces. Still are just at quote unquote part
part
time.
time.
Although I hear reservists work more than reg force guys sometimes. But I love hearing about the non-rosy times and what you can learn. So as a leader, what was some of the big failures, or if something particular sticks out to you, where you're like, oh, I messed that up as a leader, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. Admitting when you failed. Uh, Honestly, I don't have an exact example to walk through, because I find they always help to explain something. But I know a lot of times where I find things didn't go the way I wanted, didn't go right, or were usually because I hesitated somewhere. I had that gut feeling where I should have, no, what, I'm being advised about this, I'm being advised about that. You know what? None of it feels right. It doesn't look right. No, we got to try to do something different. We got to change angles. We got to look at this from a different angle, whatever. And it's when I didn't do that, when I had that gut feeling, um, be it and be it in an HR context where someone was doing something, I was like, we're looking at promoting him, or we're looking at moving her forward, and like, there's something wrong. I just can't figure it out. Maybe we need more time. Maybe we need to look at this person longer. We need to figure out, why am I not seeing it the same way as everyone else? And I think I've had it happen once where I just bit my tongue, I let it go, and I regretted it after that, because that person got pushed forward too fast, and then and made a couple mistakes that, had they been held back a little longer, or maybe had been coached, mentored a little bit more in that new position, they wouldn't have hurt themselves. I it has. It's like I said, it's hard admitting when you fail, right? I think it's an important
No.
trait in leadership, is being able to say, yeah, my bad, on me. I'll take this. I'll correct it. I think that's the biggest thing I've always tried to pass on to the people I work with is, if you make a mistake, just own up, own it, own it. There'll be a lot less problems. You own it, deal with it, and move forward. I'm just, I'm just looking at, you know what? This is probably going way back, and it's a really, really weird example. You'll get it for sure. So,
Let's hear it.
yeah, young troop commander John, still in the reserve, so it's my first stint. So this is prior to '05. My troop sergeant major is a Reg Force guy, Reg Force warrant officer. My senior sergeant's a Reg Force guy, and I was lucky. I was a very, very lucky young officer. I had some strong NCOs that coached me, that tried to help me learn how to work so it would make sense, still making me in charge. I have decisions to make. The one discussions we always had, the standard, beans and bullets. who's in charge of the beans and bullets? The NCOs, right? Let them do the beans and bullets and take care of the boys. You do your officer job, plan, do this and that and that, write the documents, so on and so forth. And we were going on an exercise or field training X in it's like 1 or 2 days, nothing big. And something went wrong at one point, and I inadvertently canceled the food, not realizing I'd done it. Yeah. So show up, we start doing our stuff, and then the food's just not showing up. And then Sergeant Major just looks at me and he's like, "Sir, where the hell's the food?" I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about?" He goes, "You canceled it." I was like, "What do you mean I canceled it?" And then we went back through everything, and yeah, I had canceled it. I had no clue. It's one of those stupid mistakes, and ever since then, I never messed with those things. I learned my lesson. They hounded me for about a year, and actually, one of the senior sergeant when I was a battery commander. Oh my lord! Almost 15 years later, he was my battery sergeant major, and we still had that discussion every now and then. But it's a stupid example, but I impacted directly my soldiers, and I never forgot. Just because this is ridiculous, it makes no sense. How could I? It was one of those. I was 20 years old. I was like, how can I allow that to happen? How could I let? How could I have that happen? So, I don't think I've had anything that funny. I would say to talk about more modern, but that one stuck with me. I mean, I was 20 years old when it happened. I'm freaking almost 44, and I still remember it like it was yesterday.
That's a good example. You canceled the food. So did you guys get food at some point? Like what happened?
Oh yeah. We got it sorted. We got it sorted out. I think actually, okay. I think the TSM had picked it up early enough, realized I'd done it, didn't tell me as a learning lesson opportunity, obviously.
Right.
And then, I think there's a couple of stories like that where my first TSM picked up on mistakes I made and corrected them, but didn't tell me.
Corrected it and didn't tell you.
Yeah, waited for me to learn. It's good. I never held it against them because you know what? I retain those lessons. It's an interesting way of teaching sometimes, but
now, and you're a public servant civilian now. So how have you taken these lessons across, the quote unquote bridge per se and applying them in your new role? How's that working out?
Honestly, it's not that hard. Right? Because the principles and the techniques kind of apply. All you got to do is tailor them to that. These are not soldiers. They're not, I hate to say it, they're not people that have signed the dotted line with unlimited liability, right? Like what we've done. But it's the same thing at the end of the day. You just have to be, the wording is a bit softer. I guess is the only way to say it. I can't get mad. I can't yell at people. But that's okay. It's more of, there's more discussions. It's a lot more patience, I would find. Whereas with the military, a lot of times, examples, we did a big exercise 2 weeks ago here in the Montreal region between the military and the Coast Guard. And a couple of times I was there as, not as Coast Guard, I was actually there as military. And a couple of times I had to go into call sign 8, so the logistics guys, and have a very direct discussion with specific people as they were not delivering what they needed to deliver where it was asked for on time. So we sorted that out. But that same situation with the Coast Guard, it would have to be a much softer discussion, not as direct. And it's not that bad. You get used to it, honestly, and you just got to try to foresee problems sooner so that you can bring it up faster. And it's often, you can't, I hate saying it this way, but you can't actually go after a person. I think that's the biggest difference I found with the military. I could single out one person and say, hey, you made this mistake. You got to fix it right now. And most of the time I've found egos don't get flustered, don't get ruffled, and people carry on, so on and so forth. Public service, I have to be much more gentle about it. I can't speak the same way. Simply because you can't be as rough around the edges, just because, and the tempo's not as fast. So usually we have more time to fix the issue, to identify the problem. For sure on the operational floor, if it's critical, I have seen where it can be pretty direct, but still it's not I'll call it Army Direct, I guess is the way you can call it. It's still much more polite, and it's not to say that the military we're not polite towards each other. It's just when we're operational, and it's the focus is very that way. Whereas public service, a lot of times, is there's more time available. You can think, and you can. It's a lot more coaching. I find that's the one thing I find. There's a lot more ability to coach and mentor and teach people on a day to day basis because we don't do a lot of, oh, well, let's go do a training exercise, let's go do this over here. We're in the office all the time, so you see the same people and they tend to do the same job over and over and over, whereas the military, we change all the time. I mean, I think I change jobs, except for when you're in command. I change jobs almost every year, every second year for 17 years, so I've done a lot of jobs. Coast Guard, I've been there 2 years. I'm on two jobs, but that's because they needed me. They brought me in for one thing and said, "No, we need you over here because your strengths are this. We want you over here doing that." But then you have a lot more time. It's a lot slower pace, at least where I am now. I can't speak for all departments. I can speak for where I am. It's the pace. We have time, right? But also, I find it takes more time to teach people to bring them to understand, because it's the motivation to get them to change that's hard. I find this a lot harder because they don't always have the same mindset, like I said earlier, whereas I take what's the mission and what's the mandate, and that's what guides my decisions. And if I know we're not going to achieve it, well, we're going to make changes to try to achieve it. Well, that focus mindset came over with me, and not everyone's like that. I would say a large proportion of people aren't like that. They're like, hey, it's my 9 to 5 job. I come in, I do what I got to do. At 5 o'clock, I leave. If it's not done, it's not done. So,
Yeah, no, yeah, I could see that for sure, and feel it come from you. And the coaching thing is definitely interesting, right? Because military is known for leadership development and quote unquote coaching and all this stuff. Whereas you're saying, you find more opportunities with the Coast Guard right now. Now, with that being said, you're in operations and stuff. What's the biggest challenges going on right now from a leadership standpoint you find this day and age, and how are you guys going about tackling it?
um, that's a hard one, actually, to tell the truth. Honestly, I think one of the ones that we see, or that I've noticed where I am, is employee turnover. Even in the government, some people, I mean, and I'll say it, I've said it to people that were applying for it. Sometimes it's more about getting your foot in the door and then finding the right fit. And I find that's what people are having a hard time with, is finding the right fit for them. So they'll accept the job. So actually, example I can give is one of the guys that works for me in my reserve unit is a public servant. And we've been talking on and off about this, and where he is now, he's like, oh, I'm doing this kind of job. Oh, this department's offering me 20K more for the same kind of job. I'm going to go. He's gone. He's been there for about 5 months and he hates his life. It's not at all what they said they were going to do. And he's a hard charger. Like he wants to, he wants to work. He wants to do this, and his bosses are micromanaging him. And it's so now he's like, I'm not going to stay here. So he's hunting for a new job already. Like, and he's already been there 6 months. Um, so I think you said something right there, where you mentioned in the military, we train our people. So as you come in, you go up, you get leadership training, you get experience, you go up again, you get another set of leadership training, you more experience, you go up, and you do it throughout, right? And I'll quantify, this is really the Army side of the house. The other two elements are a bit different. But from the Army, we finish our phase training, we're put right away as a young officer in charge of troops. And right away you're faced with, a 40-year-old warrant officer that's looking at you going, all right, great, young guy, what are you going to do? Right. But we do that throughout our entire career. In the public service, they don't do that. Right. It's qualifications, it's this, it's that. It is experience, but it doesn't necessarily mean leadership experience. Whereas us, it's kind of built into both on the Army side. In the public service, it isn't. So we do get people that hit very senior, very important positions that don't doesn't mean they're bad leaders. They just don't know how to lead. Some of them could be good leaders with some mentoring and some coaching. There are programs in this public service to get there to do that, but still, I mean, you got a guy like you or I that crosses over, and we're almost an immediate threat because we have so much experience and background for our age compared to a pure public servant, which causes that turnover. So that was, and I'll say, I know I'm not actually answering so much to your question. Like that was my hardest transition point for me, is going from a military that understands when I show up, they see my rank, they see my name, they see my trade, they understand my background, the general background of what I bring as I show up. Go to the public service, they have no understanding, and it's not their fault. It's a different world. So at 44, I come in with so much job experience, and then you try to get them to understand. They're like, that's impossible that you've done all that, or it's impossible that you manage such a budget. I'm like, well, no, I was a project officer in DLR. I was managing a $2.5 billion project. There was me and a major. That's it. That's almost the entire budget for some departments, and people have a hard time understanding that idea. So now it's try to take that and use that to make my not make myself better, but to provide more insight or more help to the department that I'm in now. But I think it's that turnover part it's stabilizing now. Maybe it's because I came over during COVID, so that's also part of the weird transition. I transitioned right at the start of COVID. So my first 2 years, I didn't even go into the office in the Coast Guard. Like I received my computer by mail. I set it up. I met I met most people that I work with in the last 6 months. I've started like meeting face to face, not just like this on a computer. So that was interesting for 2 years. So that definitely made transition hard. That definitely made the aspect of coaching and talking to people hard. But yeah, so maybe I'll have to quantify that. Maybe what I see is part and parcel due to what we're living, right? The COVID, or I think what do we call it? The Great Resignation. You guys, the term you've used a few times.
Yeah, great resignation.
And it's hard to get people. Honestly, like we have competitions open constantly to hire people, and I keep telling people, no, just go look, sign up, and it's just hard to get people to do it. It's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
we're short people left, right, and center. Maybe our processes could be better. I don't know, but recruiting and selection is not easy. Just because you don't get that right amount of people, or people will do it and go, oh, you know what, I'm not interested. Don't no, which is surprising. Why would you go through putting your application in, doing, and government applications are a pain because you got to do a CV, you got to answer questions, and everything is long winded. And then you do an interview, and then you do a security check, and then your references, and then turn around and say no. I have a hard time with that one.
You said a few things in there though, and resignation, the Great Resignation, getting people, holding on to people, definitely I would say is one of the top, leadership challenges this day and age. But you said something interesting, which I think a lot of people don't hold enough weight to, and that is, getting people in and getting their foot in the door. And we kind of need to look at this a little bit better. So it's kind of like, a negative connotation, but not necessarily. Let's get people in, let's get them to experience the organization and see what they're good at, what they enjoy, and then go, okay, well, you're obviously not the best fit for my team, but you're a good person, you're a good worker, you fit in well with the organization whole. What are you interested in? Like, where can we fit you into elsewhere within the organization, and use it that way, by simply saying, "Oh, you're not a good fit for my team," or and inversely, the members who are people who are applying for these jobs and going, "Wow, this place sucks. I don't like my team. I don't like my job." Well, what else is around there, and enabling that kind of flow with internal a bit better, I think is what could help us. Now, obviously, you working with a public servants and me being military, like, it's not easy. So much political red tape, or political as in policy red tape,
Yeah.
to go through to get through those things. But for like a lot of businesses out there, private sector businesses, that stuff doesn't exist. So for you, the leader, they're listening to this and you have that problem, well, have a look at your ability for people to shift amongst jobs and try out different things. And maybe you got Jim in one job and Jane in another. Jim doesn't like his and Jane doesn't like hers, and all of a sudden you flip them and boom, both are happy. Instead, you don't, and then you got two vacant positions.
Yeah,
Food for thought, folks.
Yeah, no, I would add absolutely. It's I think the public service we've gotten a little bit better that we can. So there's a way where you can do. I don't like this job. I'm just going to apply somewhere else. Once you're in the system, you're in the system. It's a lot easier. But even within the system, sometimes it's very much we need to try, and we do. I know with the teams that I've been working with, we do try when we identify someone's got a strong potential for leadership. Well, we try to do short-term little acting jobs and put them in a leadership position and see how well they do, and then there is an attempt to try to do that building that I was talking that doesn't really exist, but that's department dependent, team dependent. So I have the advantage that where I am, there's a couple of retired military, so retired Air Force, retired Navy, all within the Coast Guard. So it's we get together, and actually it's funny, we get to talk, we talk military, but we talk about how we apply within the department and how we can use that and how we can use our people, and when we see a strength. So the watch in the operations center, that's exactly what they do, is they target the strengths of everyone that's there, and when they have little projects that come up, they ask them. That's a bit of the difference. You have to ask them if they want to do it, versus in the Army we can say, well, here, you're strong there, we're going to make you do it. Here we go, hey, we know that's one of your strengths and something you like. You want to do this as part of your normal daily job. You want to do this little project for us. And most of the time they say yes, and it actually keeps them motivated because then they look for more. But we do that flexibility. But that, again, this is specific to where I am currently and this organization, the sub organization I'm with. And they're good at that because there's a high turnover rate. So they're trying to keep them as long as possible. Because you're getting people, you got to train them, prepare them, then they become functional, and then they leave. Well, that doesn't really help us, especially that recruiting someone new can be a 6 to 8 month process. So that's how we've been doing that. But yeah, what you're saying is, get in. Oh, not the right fit. You applied for this job, you got it, but you're not working. Do we have somewhere else? Instead of wasting that person's time and the company's time, can you use them to better affect, to better benefit that person, to better motivate them, and then therefore they bring more to the company?
No,
I think
absolutely.
a good example of that is one of our members on the mastermind and everything. I think he's got where obviously I'm not going to give any details, but he's got a potential of going to a new company, and he's motivated to progress, and he hasn't even started yet. So I'm just hoping that company sees that in him when he shows up.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure they will.
If they don't see it, they're blind. But no,
absolutely. I can't wait. That's such a huge success story. And he's definitely taking advantage of the group for sure. Oh, John, it's been a great conversation, buddy. As we wind down, I got a couple last questions for you. I'm sure as a podcast listener, you know what they are. So, final question. According to you, Jonathan Audet, what makes a great leader?
I should have known you were going to ask me that. Could have prepared. You know what? Honestly, a great leader is someone that's not afraid to make a decision, that not afraid to accept responsibility when it goes wrong, but also share when it goes right. It's not all him, all her. It's the team that helped that person make that decision and put everything forward. I can lead myself every day. It's not hard. I just got to get up and do something. It's that team. And a real leader is, at the end of the day, if that team can't follow him and he doesn't acknowledge that team, I think then you're not leading, right? At the end of the day.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And the final question always has been, shameless plugs, but you have nothing to plug. You're not here.
The mastermind.
Like I said at the beginning, as I said at the beginning of the episode, this is all about getting perspective from the trenches per se. But if there is something you like to plug or shout out, whatever, feel free. It's all I guess open mic for you.
It's like I said, there's not much for me to plug. I mean, I work for 2 different departments in the federal government, one part-time, one full-time. So, and then I guess this is the other hobby, is helping you and doing this stuff. Honestly, I would say with what for those who are listening, is if you need a place to talk, if you need a place to bounce ideas off, the mastermind that's the Scott's got going. I've been there since the beginning. I help them out as much as I can. Example, we had that one success story. I'm the one who did the coaching with him prior to his interview. It's a fantastic little group. Right now, it's still a real little nucleus, a little tiny group, and it's good fun. We get some good laughs most of the time, and we get some good ideas going too. I would say, that's anyone that is looking for that kind of conversation, looking for other people in leadership environment that to just connect with, that's not necessarily connected to your company, to wherever you work, to bounce ideas off and not feel worried that it'll come back at you because it's within the company kind of thing. I mean, I think we do that on a weekly basis, honestly, when we get those conversations. There you go. I plugged your stuff. How's that?
That was not a paid advertisement, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Nope.
But I appreciate the words. I appreciate you, man. Thank you again for taking time out. I know you're a busy man, but thanks again.
All right. Thanks. Have a good night, man. Take care.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend. Win-win all around, and hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.